Welcome to your deep dive on Packer. Looks like you've all been really digging into how to use Packer for automating machine image creation.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Automating this process can be a real game changer.
Totally. Manually creating images is so time-consuming and error-prone.
Oh, yeah.
I can see why you'd want to streamline that.
Exactly. And Packer is a fantastic tool for just that.
Okay.
It helps you create consistent, reliable images across different platforms, which ultimately leads to faster deployments and fewer headaches down the road.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Sure.
Imagine you're trying to build a custom image, say on AWS.
Okay.
How does Packer make this process easier?
Well, think of it like baking a cake.
Okay.
You wouldn't just throw all the ingredients together randomly, right?
Right.
You'd follow a recipe.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what Packer does.
So the Packer template is our recipe for building the perfect machine image.
Precisely. This template, written in HashiCorp configuration language, or HCL, tells Packer exactly what to do step by step.
So it defines things like the source of our base image,
Yeah.
any software we want pre-installed,
Uh,
and what kind of image we want as the end result.
exactly. It's like a blueprint for your image, ensuring consistency and repeatability every time you build.
Now, when Packer goes to build this image on AWS, what are the crucial steps it takes?
Well, first things first, Packer needs to create a temporary instance on AWS to work with.
Oh.
Think of this as Packer's workshop, where it assembles all the components of your image.
And that's where VPC and subnet configurations come into play, right?
Absolutely.
We need to tell Packer where to set up shop.
You need to specify the VPC and subnet where Packer should launch this temporary instance.
Okay.
And here's a key point. Make sure the subnet is public and the instance has a public IP address.
Why is that so important?
Because Packer needs to be able to communicate with that instance to do its work.
Gotcha.
It's like having a phone line so Packer can give instructions and transfer files.
So Packer has its workshop set up with a dedicated phone line. What happens next?
This is where the real magic happens.
Okay.
Packer connects to that temporary instance and starts executing all those steps you defined in the template.
So it's like Packer's remotely controlling this instance, installing software, configuring settings, running scripts, and basically getting everything ready.
You got it.
Right.
And the beauty of this is that you can define all these actions in your template, making the entire process repeatable and automated.
Right.
No more manual configuration steps.
That's a huge time saver, especially if you need to build images frequently or for different environments.
Absolutely. Once all those customization steps are done, Packer shuts down the instance, takes a snapshot of it, and uses that snapshot to create your AMI, your golden image.
Okay. That AMI is then safely stored in my AWS account,
Yes.
ready to use whenever I need it.
Exactly. And the best part is Packer cleans up after itself.
Oh, nice.
It destroys that temporary instance, leaving you with just the shiny new AMI and no lingering resources to worry about.
So Packer handles the entire build process from start to finish.
Yes.
Including setting up the environment,
Yep.
customizing the instance, creating the image, and even cleaning up afterward.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that whole process we just talked about was specifically for AWS.
Right.
What if I want to build images for other platforms
Sure.
like Azure or Google Cloud?
That's one of the great things about Packer.
Okay.
The core workflow remains consistent across different platforms,
Right.
whether you're building for AWS, Azure, Google Cloud,
Huh?
or even a local virtualization environment like VirtualBox. The steps are fundamentally the same.
So the process of defining the template, provisioning the instance, and creating the image is pretty much universal.
Exactly. Of course, there will be platform-specific settings and configurations, but the overall workflow is consistent.
Okay.
This means you can leverage your Packer knowledge across various environments, which is a huge advantage.
That's awesome. It makes Packer incredibly versatile and valuable for anyone working with multiple cloud providers or virtualization platforms.
Absolutely. And speaking of platforms, how do we actually interact with Packer to tell it what to do?
Right.
What's the interface like?
Well, it's not a fancy graphical interface with buttons and menus.
Yeah.
Packer is primarily controlled through the command line,
Yes.
the CLI.
It's all about typing in commands.
Okay.
But don't let that intimidate you.
Sure.
Packer CLI is actually quite user-friendly, especially with a few handy tricks up your sleeve.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Okay.
What kind of tricks are we talking about?
Well, for starters, you can enable autocomplete
Okay.
by running the command Packer autocomplete install.
Okay.
This allows you to use the tab key to complete commands and options,
Oh, nice.
saving you a lot of typing and potential typos.
Ooh, I love shortcuts. Anything else that can make my life easier on the command line?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's look at some typical Packer commands.
Okay.
The most common one is Packer build, which kicks off the entire build process. You simply pass your template file as an argument, and Packer takes it from there.
So Packer build, and my image starts building.
Pretty much.
Simple as that.
And you can include various options with this command to customize the build further.
Okay.
For instance, debug for troubleshooting.
Okay.
Or var to set specific variables.
So Packer build is our go-to command for starting the build process.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing there are other useful commands we can use with Packer.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
There are several subcommands that can be incredibly helpful in various situations.
Okay.
And we'll delve into those in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm ready to unlock even more Packer secrets.
Great.
We'll be back with more Packer goodness in just a moment.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Packer. We just covered the basic workflow and the Packer build command.
Right. But Packer has a lot more to offer. It's like a Swiss Army knife for image creation, with specialized tools for different tasks.
I like that analogy. So what other tools are in this Packer Swiss Army knife?
Well, let's say you're working with an older Packer template. Maybe it's a template you created a while back or one you inherited from someone else. The Packer fix command can be a lifesaver in these situations.
How so?
It automatically updates those older templates to be compatible with the latest version of Packer. Think of it as a quick tune-up for your templates, making sure they're running smoothly with the latest and greatest Packer features.
That's super handy. No one likes dealing with compatibility issues.
Exactly. Now imagine you're looking at a Packer template and you're trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together. It can get a bit overwhelming, especially with complex templates.
I could definitely see that happening. Templates can get pretty intricate, with variables, builders, provisioners, and all sorts of configurations.
That's where the Packer inspect command comes in. It's like having X-ray vision for your template. It shows you all the different components in a clear, structured way, making it much easier to understand what's going on.
So it's like getting a behind-the-scenes tour of my template.
Exactly. It breaks down your template into its core elements, showing you the variables, the builders, the provisioners, and how they all connect. This can be incredibly helpful for debugging or simply for understanding how a particular template works.
That's a great tool for getting a better grasp of the template's inner workings. Now, before we actually run a build, is there a way to check for errors or potential issues in our template?
Absolutely. The Packer validate command is essential for catching mistakes early on. It checks your template for any syntax errors or configuration issues that could cause problems during the build.
So it's like a spell checker for our Packer templates.
That's a good way to put it. It helps ensure that your template is well formed and that all the settings are correct. This can save you a lot of time and frustration by catching those errors before they derail your build process.
That's a crucial step in the workflow. Catching those errors early can save a lot of headaches down the road. Now, we've been talking about HCL templates, but I know Packer also supports JSON. Is there a way to switch between these formats?
Yes, you can convert older JSON templates to the newer HCL2 format using the Packer upgrade command. This can be helpful if you want to take advantage of HCL2's enhanced features like comments and improved syntax.
So it's a way to modernize my existing templates and bring them up to speed with the latest Packer standards.
Precisely. Now let's talk about sensitive information. Passwords or API keys, we don't want to hard code those directly into our templates, right?
Absolutely not. That would be a major security risk.
Exactly. That's where environment variables come in. Packer provides a secure way to handle sensitive data without exposing it in your templates.
So instead of putting my secret key right in the template, I can store it as an environment variable and Packer will know how to use it.
You got it. This keeps your templates much more secure and makes it easier to manage sensitive credentials. And speaking of environment variables, you'll want to know about Packer log and Packer log path.
What do those do?
They control logging, which is super helpful for debugging. If you run into an issue during a build, these variables allow you to adjust the level of detail in the logs, giving you valuable insights into what's happening behind the scenes.
So it's like having a detailed record of Packer's actions that I can analyze if something goes wrong.
Exactly. It's like having a black box recorder for your builds. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about plugins. Packer has a modular architecture that allows you to extend its functionality with plugins.
Plugins, right?
Yeah.
I've heard they can add a lot of power and flexibility to Packer.
Absolutely. Think of plugins as specialized add-ons that enhance Packer's capabilities. You can use plugins to integrate with different cloud providers, use various provisioning tools, or even create custom workflows tailored to your specific needs.
So if I need to do something specific that's not built into Packer, I can probably find a plugin for it.
Most likely. There's a vast ecosystem of Packer plugins out there covering a wide range of use cases. And managing these plugins is easy with the Packer plugins command.
What kind of things can I do with this command?
Well, you can use Packer plugins installed to list all the plugins that are currently installed on your system. This gives you a quick overview of the plugins you have available.
So if I want to know which builders, provisioners, or post-processors are already installed, I can just run that command.
Exactly. And if you need to install a new plugin, the Packer plugins install command has got you covered. You can either specify a remote source like GitHub or provide a local path to a plugin binary.
So if I find a cool new provisioner on GitHub that I want to try out, I can easily install it using that command.
Precisely. And when installing plugins, especially those from third-party sources, always remember to carefully vet and verify the plugin before installing it. Security should always be a top priority.
Good point. Now, is there a way to see which plugins are required for a specific Packer template?
Yes, the Packer plugins required command does exactly that. It analyzes your template and lists all the plugins that are necessary for that specific template to function correctly.
That sounds like a great way to make sure I have all the necessary plugins in place before I even attempt to build.
You got it. Now, speaking of managing plugins, there's a newer command called Packer init that streamlines this process even further, especially when working with HCL2 templates.
Oh, I've heard about Packers in it. What does it do?
Well, it basically initializes your Packer project by automatically downloading and installing any plugins required by your HCL2 template. No more manual installation of individual plugins.
So it's like a one-stop shop for setting up my Packer project with all the necessary plugins.
Exactly. This can save you a lot of time and effort, especially when starting a new project or working with complex templates that require multiple plugins.
That's super convenient. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I wanted to circle back to template validation. We talked about the Packer validate command for checking syntax errors. But is there a way to validate the configuration of a template without actually running a build?
Yes, you can enhance the capabilities of Packer Validate by using the Evaluate Data Sources option. This is particularly helpful for HCL2 templates as it instructs Packer to evaluate all data sources defined in your template during the validation process.
Data sources, right? Those are ways to fetch external data that can be used in our templates.
Precisely. By evaluating data sources during validation, you can catch potential issues like incorrect API keys or invalid data formats before they cause problems during your build.
That makes sense. Catching those configuration errors early on can save a lot of time and prevent build failures down the road. But is there a downside to using this option?
Well, it's important to note that evaluating data sources during validation might incur costs if the data sources you're using charge per operation. So you want to keep that in mind and use this option judiciously.
Good point. Now let's move on to formatting. We briefly mentioned the Packer format command, which automatically styles your template for readability. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The Packer FMT command is your friend when it comes to maintaining a consistent style and format for your HCL2 templates.
So it's like having a code stylist for my Packer templates.
Exactly. It automatically adjusts the formatting of your template to adhere to the standard HCL2 style guidelines. This makes your templates more readable and consistent, which is especially important when collaborating with others.
So if I have a team of developers working on Packer templates running Packer FMT, it can help ensure we're all on the same page stylistically.
Absolutely. It enforces a unified style across your project, making it easier to read and understand each other's code. And readability is key for maintainability and collaboration.
That makes a lot of sense. Consistent formatting can make a huge difference in the long run. Now, we've covered a wide range of Packer commands in this part of our deep dive, from managing templates and plugins to handling sensitive information and ensuring template validity.
And we've equipped you with a powerful set of tools to streamline your image creation process and troubleshoot any issues that may arise.
Absolutely. But there's still one more crucial area we need to unpack: choosing between HCL and JSON for writing your Packer templates. We touched on the pros and cons earlier, but let's delve deeper into that decision-making process in the final part of our deep dive.
Right. That's an important decision, and will guide you through the factors to consider so you can make the right choice for your specific needs and workflow.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Join us for the final part of our deep dive on Packer, where we'll unravel the HCL versus JSON dilemma and provide you with the insights you need to become a true Packer master. Welcome back to the final part of our Packer deep dive. I'm excited to finish strong.
Me too.
We've covered a lot,
We have.
from that basic workflow to more advanced command line options and plugin management. Now we're ready to tackle the big question.
The age-old debate.
Right? HCL or JSON?
Yeah.
Which one should you use for those Packer templates?
It's a question that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And there's not always a simple answer.
It's kind of like choosing between two really delicious flavors of ice cream.
Okay.
Both are good,
Right.
but you might have a preference
Yeah.
depending on your mood and what toppings you like.
I like that analogy.
And with Packer templates, it really depends on what your team's experience is like,
Okay.
the complexity of what you're working on,
Sure.
and your comfort level with each language.
Right.
So let's break it down. What are some of the key factors to consider when making this decision?
Well, one of the first things to think about is your team's existing knowledge and workflows.
So if everyone on the team is already familiar with JSON,
Right.
and you have a bunch of JSON templates already written,
Yeah,
it makes sense to just stick with what you know.
exactly. There's no need to introduce a new language unless there's a compelling reason.
Okay.
But if you're starting fresh or your team is open to learning something new, HCL offers some distinct advantages.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest benefits of HCL is readability.
Okay.
It allows for comments,
Uh-huh.
which can make a huge difference when you're trying to understand complex templates or
Right.
collaborate with others.
Comments are like leaving little notes for yourself
Yeah,
or your
that's-
teammates explaining what each part of the template does.
Precisely. And this can be incredibly helpful for debugging, troubleshooting, or simply making your templates more maintainable
Right.
in the long run.
That's like having a built-in documentation system
Right.
right within your code.
And speaking of maintainability, HCL also supports more advanced language features like for loops and conditional expressions.
Okay, so these features can make your templates much more dynamic and flexible,
Yeah,
especially when you're dealing with complex deployments.
exactly. For example, imagine you need to provision a cluster of servers with slightly different configurations. With HCL's for loops, you can easily iterate over a set of values and create multiple instances with variations.
So it's like having a template that can adapt to different scenarios
Yeah.
without having to write a ton of repetitive code.
Right, and conditional expressions allow you to control the flow of your template based on certain conditions. This can be really helpful for creating templates that can handle different environments or deployment scenarios.
It's like having a template with built-in decision-making abilities.
Exactly. Now, I know we mentioned earlier that JSON has an advantage when it comes to schema support, which can be helpful for validation and guidance, especially for beginners.
So how does HCL handle validation then?
Well, HCL doesn't currently support schemas in the same way JSON does.
Okay.
It offers alternative mechanisms for validation.
So you can still ensure that your data is well-formed and meets certain criteria.
Absolutely. You can use HCL's built-in functions and expressions to define custom validation rules for your variables.
Oh, so you have more flexibility in how you define and enforce those rules.
Exactly. And remember, Packer is constantly evolving. Schema support for HCL might be on the horizon, which would further bridge the gap between the two languages.
That's good to know. Now let's talk about the tooling ecosystem. JSON being a widely used format often has better support in IDEs and other developer tools. Does HCL lag behind in this area?
It's true that JSON has a more established tooling ecosystem, but HCL is catching up quickly.
Okay, so I'm not going to be stuck with just a basic text editor if I choose HCL.
Not at all. Many popular IDEs now offer excellent support for HCL, including syntax, highlighting code completion, and error checking.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it comes down to weighing the pros and cons of each language and choosing what works best for you.
Right, there's no right or wrong answer.
Right.
It's about finding the best tool for the job.
Well, we've certainly given you plenty of information to think about today in our deep dive.
We have.
From basic workflow to those advanced command line options, plugin management, and the HCL versus JSON debate.
Yeah.
You now have a solid foundation to start really mastering Packer.
It's been a pleasure guiding you through this journey. And remember, Packer is a powerful and versatile tool that can significantly streamline your image creation process.
Exactly. So go forth, experiment, and build those amazing images. Happy packing.